Hello, my name is Clarissa Walker, and I am talking a little bit about the technology tool Audacity. Although we've discussed it already, familiar with it already because it was a part of one of our readings this week, I'm talking about a slightly different application of Audacity. So this is the website, web.audacityteam.org. The site that we have listed on the Wikispace is one that's supposed to just get us to the right place, which is the authentic site. A little bit about Audacity. We read the article that said that it was a podcast creator, which is true and how I plan to use it, but I was very interested in learning the other applications of this particular technology tool. It's a multi-track audio editor and recorder, and that what stood out to me about that is it can convert like my old school tapes and my mom's records or any of those things that I discovered that need to be digital recordings or turned into CDs. It can actually record computer playback. It's in many languages. This is some of the languages that's actually available for this particular technology tool. And the other thing is that it can capture streaming content. So I was really fascinated by the other functions of this particular tool beyond the podcast. So for my particular assignment, this is my lesson plan, so to speak. I'm actually doing reader theater using podcasts in the composition classroom. This is a typical gen ed type structure where it would be first year writing 100 or writing 104, where the rhetorical situation is an amplified part of the curriculum. So I am hoping to, and I'm really excited about this possibility of walking the students through something that would lead to collaborative writing, and their podcast would serve as a text. So just very briefly, I would essentially on day one, expose the students to the technology, because what I've learned, particularly with Twitter, is that while students are used to social media as a part of their day-to-day life, once it has academic functions, they're really not as fluid with their use. So I would spend one day simply getting them acclimated to the technology using Audacity, give them excerpts unrelated to the assignment to create sort of like sample podcasts on day one. Day two, they would get the assignment, and each student would just get a URL. And each of the URLs, and this is the part of the assignment that I'm most excited about, it's an opportunity to let students see an array of texts and types of texts that they could put on their podcast, like glamour magazines or scholarly journals or an Amy Tan short story or poems, scuba diver's blog entry. All of those could possibly be where the URL will lead them. Either way, they would need to do repeat reading and reader theater to practice fluency so that they would prepare for their podcast on day two. And each student in their groups, the small groups of 4 or 5, would have their own podcast recording. Now, day 3, the conventions of these courses would kind of come back into play. So the students would analyze the rhetorical situation of each of the podcasts in the group, listen to each student's podcast, finished podcast, and determining how they want to collaboratively write about audience, purpose, impact of media selected, the stance or the attitude of the creator, because the creator of the blog is going to be totally different than the scholarly journal, or the poem, or Amy Tan and her wit. And there's so many things that have to be considered when relaying this as a reader. So this is an opportunity for them to talk about that. So I will end this podcast with a very, very short bit of a I'm not a scholar of English or literature. I cannot give you much more than a personal opinions on English language and its variations in this country or others. I'm a writer, and by that definition, I'm someone who's always loved language. I'm fascinated by language in daily life. I spend a great deal of time thinking about the power of language, the way it can evoke an emotion, a visual image, a complex idea, or a simple truth. Language is a tool of my trade, and I use them all the Englishes I grew up with. So that was an example of one of the podcasts, and that was particularly Mother Tongue, specifically Mother Tongue by Amy Tan. Thank you for listening to my talk about Audacity and its uses in the to promote fluency in the composition classroom at the college level. And I can't wait to hear the other examples and the other technologies featured.